Linda, should I give it a few more minutes, or do you think we should?
No, I think it's noon. It's
Okay.
12:01.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Really excited to present this Lunch and Learn today from the Education Committee. My name is Kelly Moran, and we've been working on this for a little while to bring Kent Washington some information about professional liability in regards to cybersecurity, and specifically how realtors can protect themselves, their clients, their firms from cybersecurity risks. So we're really excited to have Brian Lawler here today from PL Risk, and accompanied by Paul Hacker with Access Insurance Services. And they're going to give us some much needed preventative information on how we can protect ourselves in the real estate business. So Brian, if you could first start off by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. So yes, Brian Lawler, about 35 plus years in the property casualty insurance business. Started as an agent, purchased an agency, sold it, we grew to about 50 people. Worked within the internet space for insurance agents and brokers to work for about 10 years. And but I went back to selling insurance. And so my career is all commercial insurance. And about 2 years ago, I joined PL Risk. And we'll talk about what PL Risk is in just a couple of minutes, but essentially we bring products to agents and brokers for cyber insurance and D&O and EPLI. And I'd like to introduce my colleague, Paul Hacker. Paul, introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having us. Real quickly, I've been in, prior to coming to Access, I worked in the health insurance world for 30 years, sold and health insurance and worked with third-party administrators or self-funding. And for the past 3 years working for Access, my role really is to help educate professionals on what their needs are from a professional liability or E&O perspective, management liability side, D&O, EPLI, and also cyber. So that's really my role, and I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for having me.
Great, Paul. Thanks for joining us. So as we get going, I think, Linda, you were going to we're going to ask questions, allow questions at the end of 3 sections. We have 4 sections. At the end of each of these sections, we were going to ask for any questions that would come to us via chat that we could then address at that point.
Absolutely, yes. If they have a question, they can put it in chat.
Perfect. So just quickly about just a little more identification, how I came to and how we came, Paul and I came to be speaking today is that Greg Dantis is a client of mine. And when we took a look at his insurance, there was a number of things that he hadn't known he wasn't insured for. And we were able to bring that to his attention, both professional liability and cyber. And we're actually talking to him as well, about employment practice liability. Just so as he's found, as he said, I've become a valuable resource to our firm, and anyone who knows Greg, it's really catching him when he's available. He's a busy person, as everyone is. And Paul, so you can introduce yourself. So Paul has a number of areas that he'll be speaking, and I'll be speaking on the balance of this webinar. So who is PL Risk? Just quickly, Paul mentioned a number of things. We are a nationally recognized wholesale broker. We generally work only with insurance agents. So we're not displacing the insurance agent you might be working with. If in fact you wanted to ask them about cyber insurance, we bring access to markets, we bring access to expertise that we have in both cyber, professional liability, directors and officers, employment practices liability. That's all we do. And to that, and we insure probably about 500 insurance agents and brokers, 250 or so real estate firms. A number of those real estate firms are property managers connected to large brokers and are tied to NAI Alliance, Global Alliance. So we have a lot of interactions with real estate firms of all sizes. As I mentioned, that we provide access to products and generally non-standard products that carriers, agents would not be able to have access except through us. We also have an additional side, which is where Paul is involved, to where for our products, where sometimes a real estate broker or a client isn't certain that their agent has the expertise in some of the areas that we bring to the table. And they would work directly with us and with Paul and his unit, which is called Access Insurance Access Insurance Services. One of the things that we noticed is that we insure over 600 companies for cyber, and incredibly have a substantial number of claims brought, over nearly 100 claims brought, cyber claims in the last 18 months. Many of those claims, it's amazing how large they are, because many of them are in excess of $1 million. We've got one claim at over $5 million. We actually have one real estate broker that is at about $4 million. So again, as I mentioned, looking here, a number of our claims are relating to real estate firms. What we're going to talk about today is 4 sections. So one is the attack. So, we're going to be talking about, business email compromise. I probably refer to it mostly as BEC, but essentially this is fraudulent agents, hackers, trying to use the email to get access to data and information, et cetera. We're going to talk a little bit about the attack. How do they attack? Why do they attack? Why do they target business email accounts? We're going to be talking as well as what happens when a BEC occurs. And then we're going to be going into, well, how do you prevent it? And that's really the heart of today, is if you take anything away, is that there's a number of things that you as real estate agents and brokers could take advantage of to reduce the chance of a cyber incident occurring. And then finally, we're going to talk about, even if you've done everything you possibly could to protect yourself against an incident occurring, you can't always protect against some of the third parties you work with. Maybe let's use MLS. If it went down for a week or two for some cyber incident, it's a third party that could impact your business. How might you be sure that, if there was some kind of economic loss to you, that you're able to recover it through some form of an insurance product? So we're going to talk about a cyber insurance policy and our recommendations to it. So I'm going to start leading off as what the attack is, that cyber losses have increasing in frequency substantially, and they've increased 67% over the last 12 months. So just the area of BEC claims have increased substantially. And this data has been provided by the FBI, who, when a cyber claim occurs, you generally have to report it to them, as well as maybe some other regulatory and state organizations. But 67% is pretty substantial. I started to say before, nothing and no one is 100% secure. Their claims have been against any size business, small business, large business, could be for-profits, not-for-profits. There's no discrimination on part of a hacker as to where they may try to gain access to information. And very important, it's happening even to large companies. Think about Target, think about Yahoo, think about the losses that have happened, LinkedIn, et cetera. There's a lot of places who have a lot of money spent on cybersecurity, and they're getting hacked as well. But here's the key: 80%, over 80% of all BEC-related claims, or actually all claims of cyber, is a result of an employee inadvertently letting a hacker, fraudulent agent, into their email system, and they don't even know it very often. And we believe that it could have been avoided with ongoing training, and then what we'll show you about is what's monitoring by insurance companies to watch over your web presence. To see if they insure you, they want to make sure if something pops up that could be a possible claim or a risk to them, that it'll be fixed. The additional point just about the attack is that due to COVID, many of us are working remotely, and it caught many by surprise, and a lot of companies were really not ready to have 25, 50, 100 people working from home. And so they wound up setting up remote access to letting them using their personal computers and maybe their cell phones, et cetera, which don't have the same security perhaps as you might have for a corporately owned asset or laptop. And so the criminal hackers are looking for links. They're looking for open ports. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well in just a few minutes. So the types of industries where BEC claims are occurring they're across the board. Financial services, 32% of the cyber attacks are in the financial services. Now that's an insurance company, that could be a bank, it could be an investment broker. But you know what? It could also be a title company. It could also be a mortgage broker, or a mortgage company. And you know, real estate transactions are interfacing with financial services, professional services, attorneys, CPAs, let's see, any other professional service, like as I said, a title broker or a title, or let's see, a mortgage broker, could be any of those who would also be doing a real estate transaction. Consumer discretionary is basically retail stores and anything where, you know, they have maybe online ordering, etc. Healthcare is big. And look at the number 5, real estate. So just real estate itself, specifically identified as real estate cyber related entity, real estate entity for has a cyber claim, 10% of the claims. Plus, what I would say is it would be higher for real estate if you were able to find out who in financial service and professional service of these 55% of the claims, how much of that might also be related to an incident that, you know, for real estate. So here's a picture that was taken. This is my wife feeding my granddaughter. And you can just look at her and she is totally trusting. She is ready for whatever my wife serves her. And she is just in a good place. So what does that mean? Why would I bring it up? Well, the form that BEC is connecting into and creating havoc within email and cyber opportunities is what's called social engineering. Many of you would consider, you know, may not have heard the word social engineering, but it really is networking. So imagine as you're going to a chamber of commerce meeting, you're meeting a number of people, and in the midst of this, you're forming judgments based on, is this a person I'd like to work with? Is this a person that I don't want to work with? Is this a person that, you know, maybe might be good for my business, etc. You're networking. That's really what social engineering is, but it's social engineering by hackers, fraudulent agents. So how does it start? It starts with they'll send out 10,000 emails, and it'll be set up hoping that someone will open it up, and inside the email is some kind of a virus or a link that leads to a malware. So they're waiting, they're sending 10,000 out. Many of them have been chosen. Sometimes it's just done randomly, and they're waiting for people to respond. And what are they trying to do? So going back to my granddaughter, you know, they're trying to gain your trust. The trust that would allow you to offer them to possibly transfer funds, possibly send confidential files, possibly something as simple, and I got caught in this, almost caught in it, and purchasing gift cards. My boss sent me a note 2 weeks after I had been at the company, and it said, "Hey, I'm at a party. You know, I'm traveling. I'm going to meet with a lot of our clients, and I need you to, I want to give them something. I want to give them a $100 gift card." And it was so well done, even though I had done some training the week before, that I went through a process of thinking it was really my boss talking to me. Well, that fraudulent agent, that hacker, had picked up on Facebook and picked up on LinkedIn where my boss probably was. He was probably at an insurance convention, because it was a big insurance convention. And I knew it was there. He said, "Oh, by the way, don't call me because I'm busy and I'm in the midst, but it's this urgent. I need you to do this immediately." And that's essentially what the hacker tries to do, is get you to be comfortable that the email has come from someone you trust, who you're working with. So they create a trust, and then they ask you to do something that you think is okay. So who's doing this? Initially, and you know, maybe you recall, we used to get inquiries from people who were the prince of Nigeria, and they had all this money that they wanted to send to you, and you just need to send them $5,000 and then you get $1 million, whatever the plot was. Well, that extended as the internet started. They began using emails to try to follow that same sort of plot. I get one every once in a while, but what's happened more importantly, and why it's gone up so dramatically in options and in claims, is that a lot of the international cyber criminals from all around the world are entering this space. They're no longer trying to go after large corporations because they are hard to break through their firewall. But they have found out that the return on investment for simple social engineering attacks is much higher than going after the more sophisticated, basically what they call malware-based attacks. So they're still going after target, but really social engineering via emails is much greater return for them. And I mentioned before, so I didn't give the statistic before, but the FBI Internet Complaint Center said there are almost 24,000 email compromise or email account compromise claims last year. And they say the losses were in excess of $1.7 billion. We suspect it's substantially higher than that because not everyone submits their claim to the FBI. Typically, it's just people who are, have to report to authorities, et cetera. So it could be much higher than that. And how it was done? It was done with fraudulent funds transfers. And we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. Invoice manipulation. An invoice goes out, and in the midst of the invoice, the fraudulent agent is sitting inside your email system, and they see the word invoice, they see the word wire, they see the word ACH, and they see the email. And because they're trusted, because they've gotten inside your email system, they recopy the invoices, put in a new a bank routing number and a new, bank account number, and resend it out. And that claim I was talking about with the property manager, they sent out invoices to a whole host of shopping centers to the tenants. And why this particular invoice was important, it was right at the time when they did their annual re-up based on how their sales were. So these invoices were pretty substantial. Well, the fraudulent agent changed all the invoices, sent it out and said, oh, we have a new bank account. And although people were trained and are trained in those situations to call and make sure that this is actually true, they call, each of they call the property manager, it's just, did you really send this out? A number of them didn't do that. $800,000 was gone in around 20 minutes. What happened at that point was they wound up with, they had an insurance company called Coalition. Coalition was advised. Coalition went in, they found where the fraudulent agent was, they neutralized that particular point of attack, and they were able to recover about $300,000 of the $800,000. So, and that was about a year ago when this happened. So for the property manager, there were a lot of other impacts when this became known, and its reputation was impacted. So clients started leaving them. And so these are all things that are side components of an invoice for manipulation or a BEC claim. Very often CPAs will get requests for sensitive data, and there's another way that send out W-2s, many claims when a CPA or a law firm, innocently sent W-2s or other documents to the fraudulent agent, which then went to the dark web and, weren't good, was not a good time for those whose information was compromised. And the last place is ransomware. You've probably heard more about ransomware than many of these things I just described, because they're attacking cities, they're attacking states, they're attacking counties. And the most recent one that I saw was just a couple of days ago when the city of Hartford opened up their online learning. They got a ransomware attack at that point, and it shut it all down. And we'll talk about what happens with ransomware in a couple of minutes. But basically, it's prevalent. It's out there. It's happening to a lot of public institutions, and so And basically, if you don't pay the ransomware, you're out of business until you pay it or find a way around it. So Paul, I think you're going to start talking at this point.
Yeah, I have to share my screen. I can't manipulate your screen from your
Yep.
computer. So just
Okay, great.
for 1 second here. As soon as I find the presentation. Okay. Let's do this. Okay. Well, first of all, I'm probably getting a lot of glares because my name is Hacker, and it wasn't a name I made up for today's presentation. It's my last name. Not good on the golf course, really good with cyber. So all kidding aside, Brian, thank you for clarifying that was a picture of your daughter. I was confused. I didn't know if it was the right picture for phishing or not, and that's why I'm glad you explained that to me.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you. But anyway, my role here today is really to talk about the types of business email compromise, or BEC. All right. So we just talked about phishing. You know, it's a term that is a cyber term, not really phishing. You're out on a boat, what have you. But phishing is the way what Brian was talking about, how a hacker or a cyber criminal can get into your system. And 90% of all cyber events, whether it's a ransomware event or a cyber attack or a data breach, it's really caused by what Brian talked about. Some employee or subcontractor thought the email was legit. It was a legitimate email. It looked like it was from the Bank of New York. It looked like it was from my bank where I got my mortgage from, etc. And they changed certain a digit here or a digit there and what have you. So the employee or subcontractor clicks on that particular email, and that's a phishing attack. And that's when the hacker or criminal gets into your system, and what Brian was talking about earlier, where the hacker will troll around and gather sensitive information. When is your payroll? When do you pay rent, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how these organizations aren't someone working in a garage. These are real companies out there with sophisticated folks working for them. It's just sophisticated software to really attack and get into your network, whether you're a solo realtor or if you're target, like what Brian used as his example. Doesn't matter. There are certain levels of these organizations that are going to get into your system, and they have that sophistication. And even if you do everything right from a security perspective, they're still going to get in because they know they're going to target those employees or subcontractors, like what Brian said, hundreds of thousands of emails. Someone's going to click it. That's phishing. And then if you go into something more defined in the example, you remember the Twitter attack that occurred. That was spear phishing. So a hacker specifically went after Elon Musk. He went after President Obama. He or she went after the Kardashians. I don't know why the Kardashians went after the Kardashians. So be that as it may, that's more a specific type of attack. That's spear phishing. And these are ways hackers will get into the system. This is what they use. They're tools to get into the system to gather that data. So what Brian used as an example, where our boss sent him an email about those gift cards. Usually you're going to get an email from an executive in your company, whether you're new and it looks legitimate and you know that he or she is away at a conference or tied up at a meeting, and they're going to send you an email, and you look at it and you're like, wow, geez, does he really want me to do that? At that point, you really got to stop, think, and call either his assistant and try to figure out if this is legitimate or not. So you don't have to buy those 100 gift cards. You get an email from a vendor, your vendor, like what Brian used, MLS, let's say, for example, or or CoStar, or what have you. And they're requesting, hey, we change a payment process, yada, yada, yada. They're going to manipulate an invoice. You're going to get it. You're going to look at it. Say, well, look, so I'm going to pay it. Before you do that, talk to your vendor. Call them directly. Don't call the number in the email, because that number is a fake number. It's a number to the hacker's firm. A party to an existing email thread involving funds. So a mortgage banker, broker, what have you, there's an exchange of payment instructions, other vendors are involved, you're getting that same thing. Call the folks that you know that you're relations with and make sure it is legitimate or not. You know, this is common. It even happened to me where an email came from someone impersonating me to my HR department. And my HR department called me and said, "Do you really? This is a bank account?" And we stopped it. And we see a lot of that happening out there with firms. You know, sometimes you'll get an email. There's two parties involved. You know, your mortgage broker is referring a lawyer. You know, again, when these hackers get in your system and they troll around, they gather all this information, and they create a way and a strategy. That's my dog talking next to me, and I apologize. But they work together to get more information and create and commit that fraud. Excuse me. How attackers or hackers do it. So my screen's kind of blocked because I have pictures to the right of it. But if you look on the right side, you'll see a fraudulent, socially engineered Zoom email. You know. You download this for new software, or here's a meeting that you're gonna. And we're doing Zoom all day, right? So you may think, well, this is my Zoom for the Kent Washington Realty meeting today, what have you. That's when someone clicks on it. This is what social engineering look, and that could be from Bank of America, that could be from other organizations you work with. And the one thing when you look at it, one of the ways you'll learn and I'll get to a training piece of this in a second, but just look at the email address. You know, Jane at Corvus, I know it's Jane, but she doesn't have an email address, Corvus 1NS. So they'll kind of social engineer an email address look like similar to what the email address is, but change a digit or two, and that causes them to get into your system. We just looked at that Zoom thing. Same thing with PDFs. I have a phishing example email folder. I have at least 50 examples of emails that I've gotten, whether it's from Microsoft 365, my bank, Chase, Salesforce, what have you, where they're trying to tell me that I have to update my password or something like that, or there's attaching a PDF. These are the things you don't want to click on because these are the ways hackers are getting with it into the system. And what Brian mentioned earlier about this invoice manipulation, that is huge. You know, that example was a true example for one of our customers where the property manager, someone got into their system, a criminal got into their system and found out when rent was due, found out all the parties who pay the rent, and these are substantial companies. And then they created these invoices that looked like the same invoice, but it was off by a digit or two. And when they sent that money in, once it hits it and that you wire that, it's gone. But you know, with Coalition, with the example Brian used, they're pretty sophisticated and they say they recovered some money. Most times, once that transaction is done, or many times, is once that money is gone, you're not going to get it back. And if you don't have cyber insurance, that is on you. That's coming out of your pocket, your profit and loss. Brian, I think it's yours now. Okay.
Yeah. So before we go into the next section, because that sort of ended the attack component, Linda, are there any questions that have come to you via the chat at this point?
Nope, there's nothing yet, Brian.
No, yeah. Okay. Okay.
Can I throw one in that I just thought of, however?
Yes.
So you had mentioned that these phishing attacks target our emails and look for specific words in, say, the subject line, like invoice or something like that. Would you advise for us not to use those words in our subject lines, or is there a way around that?
Brian, you want to tackle it, or do you want me to tackle that?
Oh, go ahead, Paul.
All right, so they're not looking for words. The hackers are looking to find out when your invoices are going to be done. And they're going to look at that email and that logo, what have you, whatever the logo is, and they're going to socially engineer. They're going to create a logo that looks exactly like the Bank of New York. and they're going to create invoice. And what they're doing is you're creating a separate routing number that isn't the routing number for that particular vendor you used before. And when that happens, you get the email, you click on it, and you wire that money, it's gone. Sometimes you get an email that lets the hacker into your system. And once he or she is in your system, that's when they're finding all this stuff out. So it's not a specific word you shouldn't use. It's not that. It's you've got to figure out a way from a training perspective, and I'll get to that in my next section when I'm up, how to continually train your employees and your subcontractors that these are these tricks of the trade, how not to click on those. And once you fix that and you mitigate that, you're going to have the future situations are going to be few and far between.
So does that, they're not necessarily looking into or targeting you because they start seeing emails going in and out that have these specific target words. You're saying that they're going to already target one particular person or one particular account, and then they're going to start looking for those types of things. And
It's more so like, it's not really target. Like when Brian said, there's hundreds of thousands of these emails. They have like a either AI or artificial intelligence or what have you, and they're sending like a bulk email, like an email blitz, hundreds of thousands. And they figure of those hundreds of thousands of emails they're sending out, someone's going to click on it. And that person who clicks on it gets them. That's the key to the kingdom. They're in your system. Does that answer your question, Kelly?
Yeah, so Paul, I do have a question. Does the problem start once we open the mail or just when we open an attachment or link? Or is it when we just open the email, how are we to know and what are we to do once it's opened?
Okay. Well, it's whether it's an attachment on the email or an actual email, once you let them in, him or her in, that's when they start doing their research. So it's just you've got to identify which emails are going to be potentially fraudulent. And again, when I get to my next section, I'll talk about one of the vendors we use, and we have training. And we subcontract their IT for our company to a firm, and our boss tells them to test us periodically during the year. And if you click on that, you're getting a call from your boss, and that's a call you don't want to have.
So Paul, it's not by means of just opening the email. You have to either click on a link or click on an attachment.
It's actually, it could either just opening up an email.
Or just even opening up an email. Okay.
Yep.
So it doesn't, you have to, and I have examples, like I said, you open this email from Salesforce, update your password, and it's fraudulent. Once you hit that, what they could do is they can now capture that new password you made and then go into your system after the fact. That's why they're doing this.
So that's why it's so critical. Can you hear me? That's why it's so critical that as the email comes in and you get this is not something expected. If you just send an email to someone and they respond back, that more than likely you're going to be all right. But it's something that comes out of the clear blue sky, and you weren't expecting it, like that Zoom invite. You weren't expecting a Zoom meeting, and suddenly you're getting an invite. Please fix your password, things like that. And the first step there is to look at the email, where the email came from. So you can when the email comes in, you can, and basically, I guess, Paul, you have to at least open the email to see who it came from, right? So you look at you scroll over the email address that it came from, because it's not going to show up until you you click like a reply. So you need a way to see who the person is. But again, it starts with, I think this is not right. And that's when you call your IT department, you ask someone within your organization who has much more experience in figuring out, is this correct or not? Or you just call that person. If you're expecting an email from me and you weren't expecting one from me and suddenly it looks like it came from me, just call me. It's a couple of things to work around the issue that the question was just asked. So yeah, it could be just opening the email. But most of the time, my experience has been the links or it's been the attachments that they want to really gearing you to open up where it's connected to.
Right.
I hope that answered the question. That was a question that came from someone who was attending. Were you able to answer the question?
Carol,
I guess we must.
yeah,
Okay.
I'm sure it did.
Oh,
She
there you
said
go.
yes. She said yes.
Perfect. Great. And thanks. That was a great question.
So Brian, why don't you take over the slide share now? And, all right.
Yeah. All right. I clicked the share button. Sorry. So here we go. The types of,
Yep, you're on slide 12.
yeah, I've got to go to slide 12. Apology. Let me go to it. You know what?
I think you're,
I may just have to click through. Sorry.
Based on the fact that we're not going to be able to stop any of these attacks, and yes, we can minimize our exposure, maybe we could talk about what things people and companies should be doing to protect themselves.
Hey, Greg. Yes, that's what we're going to start talking about, right? We're going to talk about after this section, things to do to protect themselves. Could we, instead of giving it now, could you give the information in about 5 minutes?
Sure, I just don't want you to start losing people's interest in the subject matter.
Okay. All right. So the key initial response, a claim occurs. If it's if it's related to money, you got to contact your financial institution immediately so that they can try to recover the funding. If you have a cyber insurance policy, the cyber insurance company should be the second, in our opinion, because the cyber insurance company will actually deploy a breach coach, which is an attorney. And that attorney will then be able to guide the business services and all the other steps afterwards. And I'm not an attorney, but to the extent I understand, can allow a lot of that research to be considered privileged. And the reason for that is if you go and do a report that said, here's all the things we did wrong, which caused the attack, that's possibly subpoenable. When someone sues you, you've basically handed them a roadmap of, how to sue you. So the business services, I've got to move this up here. So business services gather information about the compromise. The last step is need to create the reports to any regulatory authority. So if people's personal identifiable information has been compromised, you've got to notify a lot of authorities, both federal and state. So after it, you're going to begin to investigate, and essentially the insurance company is you're going to have to hire legal and forensics to do the analysis. You're going to have to figure where it happened from, because it always starts someplace within your system. That's not easily done. You're going to need to figure out how many accounts were compromised and get their advice on how much personal identifiable information has been people or personal health has been compromised. So you know what to report to the authorities. You'd have to notify the regulators, and that always involves fines, penalties, and more legal expenses. So any questions about the response to a BAC attack?
I don't have a question on any of that, Brian, but I do have two questions.
Okay.
So the first question is, and I don't know if this is something you're going to mention going forward, but I'm going to ask them anyways. What about text messaging? With smartphones now, we get a lot of texts that are fraudulent as well.
Paul, you want to answer that or want me to?
Well, it's actually not the text messaging. If the text message had an attachment, possibly they can get into your phone. But there was actually an article a couple months ago where hackers were listening to the buttons you press on phone numbers and codes for passwords and things like that. So I wouldn't be concerned on the text side. I'd be more concerned on someone figuring out what numbers you pushed for your bank account or what have you.
But there is an attachment to a text.
If there is an attachment, and they can get into your phone, and if your phone has your personal email and also your work email, which I have on my phone, once they're in my phone, and if they know the password, they can actually go into those, get into the back door, if you will, either my company email or my personal email to get the credentials. So that was one question. Did I answer that for you, Linda?
I believe so. Then I have one more question. Could the hacker use an email from one of your contacts? A lot of my emails I receive have peer names or companies, not their email addresses.
Do you want to tackle that, Brian?
No, go ahead.
So let me understand this. So you get an email, or someone gets an email. They're listing, your colleagues at your organization or what have you, right?
Sometimes the from is like is just a name. It's not you don't always see the email address.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so generally you have to click on that reply, and you're going to see that. That's the point that I typically find that you can find out who the email is from. Is that your question?
Or you can click, or you can take your cursor, your mouse cursor, whatever, and hover over that name. It could be an Outlook, An Outlook, it says, Brian, it says Brian or what have you. But it could be Brian Law, it could be Brian Master or client, what have you. You really want to put your cursor over that name on the email to see if that's an email address or a fake one.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's where, people are busy and they see a name that they're familiar with and they open up the email.
Right.
Yeah. So they learn the monikers that you might be Lawler. They see B. Lawler. They don't look anything further, and unless they're suspicious, they're just going to open it.
Correct.
Right. So does that answer your question, Linda? You have any others right now?
I do have another question. That did answer that question, but if someone's looking for, could you provide us with contact information of the agencies that you would contact if they feel they've been hacked?
At the very end, there's a list of resources at the end of
Okay, great.
this. Yes, right.
But if you were, I think if the question was if one of your members thought they were hacked and they're insured, the insurance carrier has, obviously you would work with your broker if you have a broker, and they would advocate for you. But also your insurance carrier and cyber side, like Brian said, they have their own resources, their data breach coach and their forensics and what have you. And you really have to start with your broker, and then you have your broker process that particular potential claim to the carrier.
Yeah, so typically they're the ones who are going to help set up your attorney, your attorney that's working on from the cyber regulatory perspective. They're going to know better. I would not encourage anyone to go directly to the until you know what the full extent of the claim is. And that's really where you need other professionals to be guiding you, who would know where to go to.
So they should go to their broker.
I'm sorry?
They should go to their broker.
If they have an insurance policy, that's correct.
Yeah.
If they don't have an insurance policy, then they need to go probably to their attorney to find an attorney to help them, work through which would act as a breach coach.
But I wasn't speaking in terms of their insurance broker. I was speaking in terms of their realtor broker, the broker of their firm.
Okay, right. That's correct. Yes. Sorry. We use the same word and it means different meanings. So yes. So one of the things we wanted to review with you is, how do you know if you're at risk? And despite your best efforts to go out and train your employees that here's what you need to do, how do you know stuff didn't slip through? So what happens is most insurance companies who offer cyber insurance, they will give you a quote. They'll do some kind of an internal analysis, and that's about all you know. And we represent about 35 carriers and to do cyber. And many of them, about 8 or 10 of them, will actually send with quote what's called a either a loss assessment, a cyber risk assessment, dynamic loss prevention, as the KWAOR BEC calls it. And what this allows the carrier to do is basically underwrite from the outside as if they were a hacker. They go in and they take a look at your website. They go in and they take a look at the dark web to see if there's how many of your email address have been compromised. So if Brian Lawler at Access Insurance or PR Risk has been in any way compromised in some LinkedIn or something like that hack, it's going to be on the dark web for sale. And so they go out, and it's amazing sometimes you see a company with 10 people have 150 compromised events that has been picked up by the insurance carriers who go to the dark web to figure out how much risk are they taking. So this is a sample basically of Acme Inc. And the insurance company essentially did this analysis, and they came back with here's where they're doing well, and here's where they need to work, and here's where some issues are. And so I would quickly notice hacking, malware, and unauthorized access is at 0. So they got 100% for ransomware protection and cyber extortion, 100% for phishing. They seem to be doing a good job within their system. Maybe they've been doing a lot of training. But hacking, malware, and unauthorized access, that they'll explain to you in the report what that means and how to fix it. And then what these carriers will also do is, and some will do it whether you buy a policy for them or not, they will actually allow you to talk to their engineers who developed this report to say, can you help me as a business services? I want to understand what you're saying I need to fix. So by creating this dynamic loss prevention report, we're bringing value add in advance. And then what happens if the client buys a policy, that insurance company continues to monitor all these various areas, just in case there was a fraudulent agent that got in and it didn't get picked up. It'll potentially be picked up under these types of analysis. So Paul's going to talk about, and going back to what Greg was asking about, strategies to mitigate risk.
Yeah, just.
Oh, sorry, Paul, I need you to take this.
Yep, I got it. Okay, there you go. Okay. You know what it is? My name hacker. It's the system's trying to trip me up here. All right, 15. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. So some of I think what Greg asked a couple minutes ago, tell us how to help us prevent these type of losses. Okay. The first thing is dual factor authentication, sometimes called multi-factor authentication. What does that mean? When you log on to a system and all of a sudden you get a little box, please text or call this number to get your code. That's what that is. So to prevent a hacker in your system, when I log on to my Microsoft options in my office, they're going to ask me, okay, all right, put your password in, and we're going to send you a code. When you get the code, put that code in so you can access the system. That's one of the ways you can prevent a hacker from getting into your system, having dual or multi-factor authentication. We talked a lot about training. We were talking about that. There are a lot of different firms out there that can provide that training. We use a firm called KnowBe4. And this guy, Melnick, was actually a criminal who created a company. It's kind of like that movie, Catch Me If You Can, right? So it's something like that. So what they do is they go through training and they teach you how to hover over email addresses to make sure they're legitimate, how to find out if a PDF is legitimate or not. And it's a pretty intense training. They take anywhere from 30 minutes to 60 minutes, depending upon what modules you buy. We do that twice a year with our company. And again, as I mentioned, we have a subcontractor that tests us periodically during the year, because hackers will come in with new tricks of the trade, and you have to understand, well, what are they doing? How do we prevent that employee or subcontractor clicking on that email, letting the criminal into the system? Brian mentioned something about backing up your data. It's not just backing up your data. You really have to encrypt that data, and you really have to hide that encrypted key. And there's something I learned from a presentation that I attended recently, something outside of the static backup, but something called hardware security modules. And these firms hide that encryption key. But what happens is when you have a system that's backed up and your encryption key is easily found, the hacker will go in and take that key. So when they lock your system up in a ransomware event, if you don't have the key to open it up, they're going to say, hey, if you don't pay us $600,000 in Bitcoin, we're not going to give you the key. And there are ways around to prevent that key from being taken. But the static backup with the hardware security module is very important. And those modules are really coming from your IT folks. And if you have an IT department, then I would encourage your IT folks to talk to vendors that provide the hide the key. Before I get to this section on the next one, I want to mention the ransoms. Years ago, they were $5,000 to $10,000. Now these ransoms ranging on average $1 to $4 million. Not to freak you out, but we've had customers where we had a limit of only $1 million, and the ransom request was for $1.4 million. And your data breach coach, these lawyers, will negotiate. It's kind of ironic with the hacker or criminal to take down that ransom amount from 1.4 million to $800,000. So I want to just tell you that these ransom amounts are obscene and could really, if you don't have the right security and or the right policy and limits, you're gonna, it's gonna come out of your pocket. And it's not just the ransom; it's all the other fees associated with that ransom, like the breach coach and the forensics and notifications and fines and what have you. But you also want to verbally confirm your wire transfers. We talked about that briefly before. You really need, before you wire any money, and in your business, depending upon your client, that wire can be $50,000 to millions of dollars, depending upon the size of the transaction. You want to disable email forwarding. So if you have an employee who leaves voluntarily, or you fire that employee, or what have you, you really want to turn off that email forwarding on that particular email address. We've had situations where someone left a company, but they forwarded those emails after the fact. So they were still getting emails for Joe Brown, let's say, for example, and Joe Brown forwarded it to joebrown@hotmail.com, and he or she was getting that, that particular email for those things. And that's how you want to turn that off to prevent any losses that may occur. That's 16.2. So when you, one of the other tools of the trade, you want to require all your staff not to use, if you're outside the network and your VPN, you want to have them use hotspots. If you go to like Dunkin' Donuts, we all love having Dunkin' Donuts coffee, right? And donuts and muffins and what have you. Dunkin' Donuts they had a hack. Someone got in their system and stole all the credit card numbers and bank account numbers, what have you. And Dunkin' Donuts felt it was not important to notify the authorities this occurred. New York State just hit them with a $650,000 fine. Plus, they have to give rebates back to the customers that were affected by this. Plus, they have to notify all those customers and monitor, give them free access to Equifax and what have you to monitor their credit. So anyway, not to go off on it. So
have any industries moved towards requirement of cyber insurance? Like, are there any professional industries in this universe that have required cyber insurance in order to conduct business? Like, for instance, we're required to carry our basic errors and omissions insurance policies because you're not going to stop this shit. The only thing you can do at this point is insure yourself as best you can against the future of what might happen.
You want to insure yourself, but you also want to work with your IT people and or your contractor to make sure you have everything up to date from software patches and what have you. But you're right. It's these criminals are hitting the system left and right here,
No small business has the amount of money. No small business has the amount of money to keep up with cyber criminals. So again, you're not going to keep up with it. You can try, but you need, insuring it seems like it almost needs to be a requirement.
Right, but
Yes.
what's going to happen with that? And I agree. Look, we're in the business of selling, right?
But let me just add in here for a second.
Yeah,
So,
go ahead.
so Greg, the answer to your question is the insurance business is, the state of New York is requiring any professional who is doing business in the investing financial services, one, they have to go through that training that Paul just talked about, and two, they have to show that they've got certain levels of cyber insurance in place. See, the only place that I'm aware of that when I look at my license, I have to make sure that our company has a cyber insurance policy, but it's coming. It has to come. And
It has to. There's no choice.
there has to be some way to provide protection because, as I said before, some of these claims happen because a third party had a claim that impacted you. And you could do everything perfectly. And then suddenly, your clients are mad, they're leaving you, et cetera, or you're suddenly part of a lawsuit that you're paying costs for others because maybe they don't have the assets. So but yeah, there are regulators in New York State use the lead when it comes to that, and they're requiring a cyber insurance policy for, and you have it.
Brian, could I ask a question, please, about, many of our members are, they're independent contractors, and
Yep.
they, as you know, they hang their license with the broker. Should the independent contractor ask their broker if they have cyber insurance?
Absolutely.
So the answer to that question was that it's about 2 slides from here, but the answer is they certainly should ask, but they could also do something themselves if they chose to.
Okay, we got to move along, Brian,
Yep.
because we're
Right.
getting close to
Yep.
time.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
We talked about this, not to belabor the point here, but establishing your payment options to your vendors. If there is something fishy you think from an email or what have you, and there's asking for money, call your relationships and make sure it is legitimate. Same thing, you want to set up a code. When we have an issue with our agency software, if I have to talk to my manufacturing software before they can answer a question, they send me a link and I got to give them a code so that they know that I'm the person calling about the problem and no one else is trying to get it into our system. And, we're all here to sell insurance, right, Brian and myself, but, talk to your brokers and your agents, talk to them about cyber. Cyber is a hot topic these days. We're more than happy to explain that to your broker or agent and give them access to our markets too. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Brian, okay?
All right, so let me go back to, so we've asked a number of questions so far, so let me just wrap up. We're close to wrapping up for all who are on the call.
Look at Greg, he's selling a house. That's good.
Okay. I guess it didn't want me to do it. Oh man. Sorry, I thought I was able to get it to go, but I'm going to have to do the old-fashioned way. There we go. Okay, let me go back. So what we recommend is, we're talking about cyber insurance. We're also recommending that the brokers and whoever's buying the insurance brokers or the individual to buy a policy that's called standalone. So basically it's only a cyber policy. Very often policies are added, cyber insurance is added as an add-on to your professional liability, for example, but it might only be $100,000 of coverage, and that's not going to be enough. And very often that's only, in case private information is stolen. A standalone policy will give you a number of coverages that are not typically on an endorsement to a professional policy. And some of the coverages are network security and privacy liability. So let's say you have $1 million limit. It's going to give you 7 different components. And one of them is network security. That's paying in the privacy liability. That's paying the investigation and the fines and the fees that relate to private information being made public or stolen. Another area is, well, what are the breach expenses? The breach expenses and remediation, getting yourself back to where you were before the loss occurred, is where is included under a cyber insurance policy. We're talking a lot about social engineering and cybercrime. That's essentially typically about $500,000 of coverage or $250,000 that if it's money is stolen one way or another due to a breach, that they have $250 to up to $500,000 to pay, reimburse you for the cash loss. Under the network security and liability and privacy liability, that's a third party coverage. I should have mentioned that before. Essentially, that's covering you when someone says you wronged me as a third party. The social engineering and cyber crime is more a first party coverage, means it's covering you, the person who's the event occurred to. So in the regulatory fines is also more third party. You're not suing yourself and being insured, but it's the regulatory is you're paying a third party called the state. Business interruption, we mentioned before, you lose a lot of clients because they don't think your website or your email system is secure. You can prevail, if you can validate what the difference in income is, there's coverage for that as well. Digital asset destruction, data retrieval, system restoration are again all related to fixing, getting you back to where you were. And these are all interrelated. And the last one is cyber and extortion coverage, cyber extortion and ransomware. All this is built into a typical policy, which I mentioned earlier and I'll mention again. It's important if it's purchased by the firm, great. It's going to include the independent agents, and it's generally going to include the agents who work for the firm. But what if the firm doesn't have it, or maybe you're concerned they don't have enough? Because what's enough based on some of the size of the claims we just described? The individual can actually buy a cyber insurance policy, not expensive, anywhere from $350 to maybe $800 if you want $250,000 to $1 million of coverage. Or the firm, I know many real estate firms, the number of brokers might get together, agents might get together and form a team. And that team could buy a policy. And then basically you name one person and the rest of them are all named as what's called additional insured. So that's the option of the coverage. And our intent today was to educate you about the risks, educate you about the opportunities to try to mitigate your strategy. And at the point that you have done everything, look at, does a cyber insurance policy help reduce the risk to your business or to the individual? So just wanted to wrap up. So it's just a matter of time, in our opinion, that when a cyber incident will occur to your business, best way to reduce the impact, just going through some of the things we talk about, is to regularly train and randomly test employees and 1099s on BEC traps. Utilize best practices software. One thing we didn't mention before is very often people will have websites with certain areas that they used to think were important and they stop using them, but they never shut it down or they never do the additional patches. And once someone goes inside your system, they're going to find that out, and that becomes an easy way to get in. You don't even need a BEC to occur. It's just an easy way to protect yourself is to make sure you always update, or your system is always updated. Paul mentioned before, confirming banking components when completing wire and ACH transactions. Seek cyber insurance companies who, again, provide a cyber risk assessment. So I said 10 of 35 we have do it, and the other 25 that don't do it, I'm less inclined to offer them when I know these other companies, work what I call more proactively. And again, the last point about cyber insurance is that you want an insurance company who immediately responds to a claim. And sometimes when it's an endorsement to a business owner policy, that's contents and liability, sometimes what happens is they don't have cyber experts that are immediately available the way a cyber insurance company does. So again, just leaving it, if you feel there's a risk not covered, cyber insurance could be an option. Standalone policy, that for the firm, standalone policy for the individuals, and just look at the carriers who are really proactive in trying to be your backup. So Paul and I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate all the questions. They were great questions, and anything you may get from us going forward would be great. We're happy to respond to them as well.
Are there any other questions, Linda, that came in, or Kelly? No? Okay.
No other questions.
All right. Thank you.
So we appreciate your time, and if there's anything else Linda or the team needs us to do right now?
No, I want to thank you, Brian, and thank you, Paul, for spending this hour with us and providing us this information. It was great.
Thank you for having
We hope you helped,
Yeah.
and hey, Greg, I see you now.
Yes.
Drive
This is-
carefully.
Well, he's driving. He's driving. Don't get him into an
Don't
accident.
distract him. I'm sorry. All right. Are you going to my new house?
Yes, very nice.
All right, great. Thanks. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you so much for everything, and thanks for coming, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you, Kelly,
everyone.
Linda.
Be
Thanks,
safe.
Jen.
It's Realtor Safety
Definitely.
Month.
Oh, that's right. Yes, be safe.
Be
All
safe.
right. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye now.